Fear of success. Why we sabotage our own happiness. You don't fear failure. You fear that everything will work out. Paradoxical, isn't it? But this fear drives many of us. We sabotage important meetings. We push away people who love us. We leave unfinished projects that could change our lives. And we do this not when we feel pain or disappointment, but precisely when everything starts to improve. When was the last time you felt so good that it became frightening? When was the last time you destroyed something beautiful in your life because you couldn't believe you deserved it? Today we'll dive into a profound paradox: why some people find it easier to live with pain than with happiness. Why we unconsciously sabotage our own moments of joy, as if expecting an inevitable catastrophe. The comfort zone of discomfort. Imagine your typical morning. Alarm at 6:30, you hit the snooze button. Not because you need those extra 5 minutes, your body is already awake, but your consciousness desperately clings to a familiar state. That half-asleep existence where you don't need to make decisions, where you don't need to act. A cozy zone of discomfort. When psychotherapist Fritz Perls talked about the comfort zone, he didn't just mean pleasant states. Our brain tends to hold on to the familiar, any familiar, even if it's pain, suffering, or apathy. If we're used to complaining about life, complaints become our comfort zone. If we're used to toxic relationships, that's exactly what we'll unconsciously seek again and again. Sarah endured psychological abuse from her partner for years. When she finally found the strength to leave, her new boyfriend was attentive, caring, stable, and that's what scared her the most. "I started making up reasons for arguments," she says. "I constantly expected that he would show his true face at any moment, that it was all a deception, that I didn't deserve such a relationship." What was new and unknown to her, healthy relationships, caused more fear than familiar pain. Sigmund Freud called this repetition compulsion, the tendency to return to traumatic situations, as if trying to master them. But modern neuroscience explains it more simply. Our brain conserves energy by sticking to familiar patterns, even if these patterns are destroying us. Childhood lessons that haunt us. Little Jake, 5 years old, drew a colorful picture and runs to show it to his father. Dad is tired after work. Irritated, he barely glances at the drawing. "Later, can't you see I'm busy?" It's a small moment. Dad won't even remember it tomorrow. But for Jake, it's a lesson. My joy and achievements aren't important to others. When I'm happy, I get pushed away. Now imagine Jake, 30 years later. He gets a promotion at work, but instead of celebrating, he begins to sabotage the project. He's late for important meetings. He argues with management. 3 months later, he's fired, and when it happens, he feels relief. He returned to a familiar scenario, to confirmation of his inner story. I don't deserve success. The fear of freedom. Psychologist Erich Fromm wrote about the fear of freedom, a paradoxical state where a person fears their own possibilities more than their limitations. When we are limited by external circumstances, we can blame them for our failures. But when opportunities open up before us, all responsibility falls solely on us. What if we try and can't handle it? What if it turns out we're not as talented as we thought? What if we can't bear the burden of success? It's simpler not to try at all. Simpler to stay in pain than risk the even greater pain of disappointment. Happiness is a trap, says Andrew, a successful programmer. Every time everything is going well in my life, I start waiting for the other shoe to drop, and it always does. Psychologists call this cherophobia, fear of joy. People with this condition believe that if they allow themselves to be happy, it will inevitably lead to catastrophe, as if happiness is a debt that will have to be paid. Remember your thoughts when you last felt really good. Didn't you have a fleeting thought, "This is too good to be true," or "Something bad must be about to happen"? This belief doesn't come from nowhere. It's formed through cultural narratives. Remember sayings like, "Don't count your chickens before they hatch," or "Pride comes before a fall." Many cultures have warnings against excessive joy. Traumatic experience. If happy moments in your life were often followed by sudden tragedies, your brain may create a false correlation. Happiness, trouble. Defense mechanism. Preparing for the worst is a way to protect yourself. If you expect disaster, it won't catch you off guard. Jessica shares, "When I got pregnant after years of struggling with infertility, I couldn't allow myself to be happy. I tried not to get attached to the baby because I was afraid of losing her. I didn't buy baby things until the last month. I refused to have a baby shower. It was as if I was trying to bargain with fate. If I'm not too happy, maybe everything will be okay." Such fear makes us live halfway, not allowing ourselves to fully immerse in joyful moments, always keeping an emotional distance as if preparing for evacuation. When suffering becomes identity, if I'm not suffering, then who am I? This is a question that is rarely voiced, but often lives deep within us, especially if suffering has become part of our identity. Carl Jung called this identification with the shadow, when a person becomes so accustomed to the role of victim, failure, or martyr that they cannot imagine themselves in another capacity. David, 42, complained to friends for years about his dead-end job. His stories about his terrible boss and impossible conditions became his calling card, the basis for friendly get-togethers, a source of sympathy and attention. When he was offered a better position, he felt emptiness. What would he talk about with friends? What would make him interesting? Who is he without his suffering? He found a reason to decline the offer. Pain can become not just a habit, it can become a meaning of life, a source of creativity, a foundation for building relationships. To give it up is like losing a part of yourself. Self-fulfilling prophecies. We don't just forecast the future, we create it. Psychologists call this a self-fulfilling prophecy. Amanda fears her partner will cheat, like her ex. She checks his phone, makes scenes of jealousy, accuses him for every delayed response. Eventually, exhausted by constant suspicion, he really does find understanding elsewhere. "See, I knew it," thinks Amanda, receiving confirmation of her worst fears. That her behavior literally pushed her partner into this situation remains beyond her awareness. This works in the world of achievement, too. If you're deeply convinced that you don't deserve success, you'll unconsciously create situations that confirm this belief. You've been asked to give a presentation. You'll accidentally be late for the meeting. You've started a new business. You'll begin to sabotage it as soon as the first signs of success appear. Robert Merton, the sociologist who introduced the term self-fulfilling prophecy, described it as a false definition of the situation evoking a new behavior, which makes the originally false conception come true. In simpler terms, we get what we expect. Not because of mystical laws of the universe, but because of how our expectations shape our behavior. The cycle of self-sabotage. Let's see how this works in practice. Imagine the cycle of self-sabotage. Success trigger. Something good happens in your life. A promotion, a new relationship, a creative breakthrough. Internal conflict. Instead of joy, you feel anxiety. There's a discrepancy between the new situation and your usual self-image. Defensive behavior. You begin to unconsciously sabotage the situation. You're late, forget important things, become aggressive, detached, or overly critical. Return to normal. The situation collapses, and you return to your usual state. Paradoxically, this brings relief. Confirmation of beliefs. I knew this wasn't for me. I don't deserve happiness. Nothing good lasts long. This mechanism works especially insidiously in relationships. Victor couldn't build lasting relationships for years. As soon as he met a woman who truly valued him, he began to distance himself, look for flaws in her, provoke conflicts. I got engaged to a woman I loved, he says. And a week after that, I started to panic. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I began to make up reasons why we weren't right for each other. And then I cheated on her with a coworker, a person I didn't even feel particularly attracted to. It's like I was trying to destroy my chance at happiness. Neurobiologist and psychiatrist Daniel Siegel explains this phenomenon through the concept of the window of tolerance, the range of emotional intensity we can handle. When we go beyond this window, towards either too much stress or too much joy, we feel discomfort and strive to return to the familiar zone. Core beliefs that fuel self-sabotage. Behind every self-sabotage stands a core belief, an unexpressed, often unconscious belief about oneself and the world. Typical beliefs that fuel self-sabotage. I don't deserve happiness, success, love. If people see the real me, they will reject me. To be safe, I must control everything. Suffering makes me special, deep, creative. Joy always ends in pain. Success will bring too much responsibility. If I achieve success, people will expect even more from me. Mark, a successful writer, shares, "After my first bestseller, I couldn't write a single line for 3 years. I was afraid I couldn't repeat the success, that I would disappoint everyone. Every time I sat down to write, an inner voice said, 'Who are you to think you can create something valuable again?'" Psychotherapist Albert Ellis, founder of Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy, believed that these deep irrational beliefs cause emotional disorders and dysfunctional behavior. To overcome self-sabotage, we must first recognize these beliefs and then systematically challenge them. Signs you're sabotaging your happiness. How do you know you're sabotaging your own happiness? Here are key signs. Procrastination becomes more intense precisely when you approach an important goal. You find logical reasons to refuse opportunities that match your dreams. In relationships, you become overly demanding or detached when your partner shows genuine commitment. You focus on small negative details in generally positive situations. You feel relief when something good falls apart. You postpone celebrating successes, as if waiting for something to go wrong. You devalue your achievements. It was just luck. Anyone could have done this. You often use self-deprecating humor to distance yourself from your own successes. Remember, self-sabotage is not a conscious choice. It's a defense mechanism that once helped you survive, but now it may be preventing you from living fully. How to allow yourself to be happy? How do you learn to allow yourself to be happy? How do you stop expecting catastrophe around every corner? 1. Practice emotional tolerance. Psychotherapist Pat Ogden suggests a technique of titration, gradually becoming familiar with intense emotions. If you're not used to joy, start with small doses. Allow yourself to enjoy moments of happiness for 30 seconds, then a minute, then longer. Like when training muscles, emotional endurance is built gradually. 2. Examine your story. Ask yourself, where did I get the belief that I don't deserve success, happiness, love? When did I first believe this? Who told me this? Often these stories begin in childhood, but we continue to live by them even when they've long lost relevance. 3. Practice preemptive joy. Psychologist Brené Brown describes the practice of preemptive grief, when we imagine the worst to protect ourselves from disappointment. Instead, try practicing preemptive joy, consciously allowing yourself to enjoy the moment, even knowing it's temporary. When you feel fear of happiness, try saying to yourself, "I'm afraid everything will fall apart, and yet I allow myself to enjoy this moment. I'm not sure I deserve this, and yet I accept it with gratitude." This technique allows you to acknowledge your fears, but not let them dictate your actions. 4. Cultivate gratitude. Instead of expecting catastrophe, try practicing gratitude for what is now. Research shows that regular gratitude practice changes neural pathways in the brain, making us more inclined to notice the positive and less fixated on the negative. 5. Distinguish between preparation and anxiety. Being prepared for possible problems is wise. Living in constant expectation of catastrophe is exhausting. Ask yourself, does this worry help me prepare for something specific, or is it just a habitual way to protect myself from disappointment? 6. Find your celebration squad. Often we're afraid to share our successes, fearing envy or dismissal. Find people with whom you can safely celebrate your achievements and joyful moments. 7. Embrace your light side. Jung spoke of the shadow, the part of our personality that we reject or don't acknowledge. For many people with traumatic pasts, their shadow paradoxically includes not dark sides, but the ability to be happy, successful, loved. Accepting your shadow means acknowledging all parts of yourself, both dark and light. Acknowledging that you deserve happiness not because you're perfect, but simply because you're human. The courage to be happy. Isabella, who struggled with depression for years after a difficult childhood, shares, "When my therapist asked if I was ready to heal, I suddenly realized I was afraid of losing the depth that pain gives me, afraid of becoming ordinary. It took me a long time to understand that I can be happy and deep simultaneously. That joy doesn't necessarily mean superficiality. There is a profound difference between living in pain out of habit and living in joy by choice. Pain may seem safer because it's familiar. It doesn't require us to grow. It confirms our worst thoughts about ourselves and the world. But joy requires courage. It requires faith that we deserve something better. It requires willingness to be vulnerable, to allow ourselves attachments, hopes, aspirations. Each of us has a choice, to continue living by old scripts or to write a new story. French philosopher Albert Camus wrote, "In the midst of winter, I found there was, within me, an invincible summer. This summer is in each of us, the capacity for joy, for happiness, for love, which is stronger than all our fears and defense mechanisms. Perhaps true courage is not the ability to endure pain, but the ability to allow yourself joy, not expecting catastrophe but openness to possibilities, not control but trust." If you recognized yourself in this story, know that you're not alone. Millions of Americans struggle with the same fears and defense mechanisms every day. But the first step to change is awareness. Now that you know about this pattern, you can start noticing it in your life. And gradually, day by day, choose differently. What have you never allowed yourself to do? And what held you back? Maybe it's time to allow yourself to try? Remember, happiness is not a destination, but a practice. And this practice begins with a simple decision. I allow myself to be happy. Not because I'm perfect, not because I did everything right, but simply because I'm human, and it's my right.